Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more particularly from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you happen to be watching on. They'll show up here in my chat room. The chat room is on the screen today since I have no guest and we can all share it. And I hope that all of you are having a lovely day. We are in the second week of the new calendrical year. And this week I thought I would focus on more existential metaphysical subjects. Today, I am going to be talking about chakras. And I came to the decision to talk about chakras after a conversation with Reverend Mary, who um, I'm sure you all know from Tarot Thursday and her daily tarot readings and Divination TV, and our frequent rituals and other things here on Corellian TV and Divination TV. We work together. And Reverend Mary first suggested that I talk about what to do with leftovers. And then she suggested maybe chakras. I decided chakras would be a better. Hello to Reverend Mary in the chat room. It's good to see you, Mary. I decided that chakras would be a better subject. However, I want to say a word or two about leftovers. And in a manner of speaking, our modern metaphysical practice is, in a lot of ways, a series of leftovers of earlier ages and cultures that we continue to practice because we continue to find it valuable. And in a manner of speaking, you could consider this to be the use of leftovers of ideas and concepts that much of society has chosen to depart from. Now, one of the interesting things is that we're seeing a lot of modern scientific thought returning to some of these more ancient ideas, which was very different from when I was a child. But a lot of our metaphysical ideas we now see being mirrored in scientific circles. We did not see that when I was young. Um, but we have maintained with these leftover aspects of knowledge for generations. And when we talk about what to do with leftovers, well, you use them to their best effect. And that, I feel, is what we do. And yes, there are new things in metaphysics too. And I am a great believer in the idea that it is not enough for us to pass on ancient knowledge or even semi-ancient knowledge. We have to continue to expand it and grow it, or we're failing in our purpose. All of these things are living disciplines. And, last year I wrote a book, Reverend Don's Book of Astrology. And, one of the things that we talk about in that book is that there are new things in astrology that are common practices today that were not there when I learned it back in the 1970s. And that's good. I don't use all of them. I use some of them, but that's good. When we look at the planets, traditionally, there were the seven Ptolemaic planets. We now have more planets that we use in astrology. And that is good. It shows that we are a living tradition that adapts to circumstances. And, these are very important things when we look at our metaphysical practice. We must be adaptive, we must be expansive, we must continue to grow. That brings us back to the subject of chakras. Chakras are a subject on which you can read all kinds of nonsense online and in books. And so much so that it's difficult to avoid. Now, you can also today find all kinds of knowledge that you could not easily find when I was young. And there are some things that were very common when I was young, which will be harder pressed to find today. For example, when I was young, it was very common to associate the chakras with the endocrine system in the body, and to link different chakras with different glands and so forth. You still see this to some extent, but it's nowhere near as prominent as it once was. Um, but some of the things that you'll find about chakras online that are to be taken with a grain of salt include the idea that this is purely a Hindu system. It is not, it never was. It is found throughout Eastern religions. It's in Hinduism, it's in Jainism, it's in Buddhism, and in various forms you find it in other religions. We'll come back to that. The word chakra, however, is Sanskrit, and the term comes from Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism. And within these systems, you will hear people say, there are seven major chakras, and they will present this as a blanket concept, and I myself have been known to do this. And in Western chakra use, this is true. In Eastern chakra use and world chakra use, the number actually varies considerably. There's not an agreed upon number of chakras. And chakras are the energy centers of the body. And because they're energy centers, because we do not see them with our physical eyes, we feel them, people attribute them differently. There are many systems around the world that only work with 3 chakras. There are a number that work with 4 chakras. There are a number that do work with 7 chakras, and I would say that is the dominant system in the world today. And there's some that have as many as 12 chakras. I believe there might even be some that have 20. And how do I reconcile all of this? Well, I think it's a matter of perception and a matter of how you're defining things. If you've read my second degree lessons and you've read chapter 9, which is some people's favorite chapter and some people's most dreaded chapter, we talk about all the levels within the chakras and how each of these levels has a slightly different focus and can be more or less developed than the others. And how developed these different levels are will affect where you feel that chakra. And this is especially true, for example, of the third eye. Certain systems feel the third eye very much between the eyebrows, and hello to Unique One in the chat room. Others will locate the third eye in the middle of the forehead. Others will place it in various parts of the forehead. Studying the binder system of chakras, we see that there are actually a number of different layers, and the one that you're working most strongly with is where you're going to feel that energy most strongly. You can therefore perceive it as being in different places. The same is true of the throat chakra, which runs all the way from the collarbone to the bottom of the jaw. And where you perceive that throat chakra most strongly will depend which part you have developed most strongly. The same for the heart chakra, the same for all of them. And when we work with our chakras, we don't all develop them in quite the same way. So if you do chakra work, if you work with people, you'll find variations between individuals, particularly if they've been trained in different systems that work differently. I want to take a moment and talk about the names of the chakras for a moment. And I'm going to read them for you. And in Hinduism, we have the Muladhara, which is the root chakra, which is located, shall we say, at the base of the spine. That is a common way to phrase it. It is followed by, and those of you who speak Sanskrit must forgive my pronunciation, the Svadhisthana, which is the sacral chakra, in the general region of the gonads, the Manipura at the navel, the Anahata at the heart, the Vishuddha at the throat, the Anya at the eyebrows, the third eye, and the Sahasrara as the crown chakra at the top of the head or just above. These are your standard 7 chakras, and these are the ones that you find in the more classic presentations that you will encounter. But in Hinduism, there are actually a number of different systems. So, for example, we have what I just went through, but you will also find, um, well, in Hatha Yoga and Kundalini Yoga, there are the seven main chakras we've just talked about. Um, in Tantra, there are traditionally said to be 4 to 6 chakras. In Vaishnavism, there are 12. Um, in Ayurveda, there are 3, which are known as marmas. Um, in Shaivism, there are 5 chakras as a general rule. In Kashmir, there are 6 or 7 Shaivist chakras. So, to make a blanket statement about the idea that this is, as we use it in the Western world, a Hindu concept, while true in essence, is misleading because it's actually a far more varied concept, even in Hinduism. And Hinduism is not the only place you find reference to the subtle energy centers of the body. Um, Different cultures have had different names for them, but Hinduism is not the only place that's had them. And for example, to give you a couple of other versions, in Taoism, there are 3 chakras, and they're called cauldrons. And you'll have to pardon my Chinese, um, because I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but they're called dantian. There's the, the sha dantian, which is basically the lower abdomen, the zhang danshan, which is the center of the chest, the zhang danshan, which is uh, the top of the head. This is part of traditional Taoism. These are chakras, um, but a different system of them. In Celtic practice, they have these same 3 chakras, also called cauldrons, um, but with different names. And I'm going to mispronounce this just as badly, but you have the Kora Schwash, which is in the lower abdomen, the Kora Ernmai at the heart, and the Kora Gariath at the top of the head. In Greece, you actually have the 7 chakras, the full 7 chakra system that they used. And Plato writes about this. It's very much a part of traditional Greek thought, and there's probably a lot more written about it than we have today because so little of their writing actually survives. But they had all 7 chakras, and they knew them as uh, the Hieron Osteon, the Gonades, the Gaster, the Phrones, beg your pardon, the Phrenes, the Trachelos, the Encephalos, and the Chrophe. And these are a few of the different chakra systems around the world. And hello to Vivian in the chat room. Vivian says, I got another blizzard for my birthday. Well, yesterday. Well, happy belated birthday, Vivian. I wish you a very happy belated birthday. Vivian got a blizzard for her birthday and almost attacked by a coyote. And then late last night, her dog brought her a possum um, that was playing dead but very much alive. That was a very exciting birthday, Vivian. And what interesting omens for the coming year. Um, Getting back to chakras, one of the reasons, hello to Black Crystal in the chat room, that I talk about how so much of what you read about chakras is at best partial, is because I write about chakras so heavily myself. I've met people who insist chakras shouldn't be in Western practice at all, which is nonsense. Plato wrote about them. Of course, they should be in Western practice. But they don't know that because education just is not that broad, particularly within the metaphysical world. And I find people who want to say that Um, Chakras should only exist within Hindu practice, which means they obviously know nothing about Jainism or Buddhism or um, Taoism or any of these various other places that have chakras. Now, the ancient Celts did not call chakras chakras; they um, called them cauldrons, quare, or something to that effect. Chinese did not call them chakras; they called them dantian. But it's the same concept. And in the West, because of certain things in the 19th century, we have chosen to use the term chakra to describe the energy centers of the body. I'm under the impression that at least at one time, we used the term plexus in part for this purpose, um, but not so much today. Today, chakra has totally taken that role. And it tends to annoy the heck out of me when people try to get pedantic over words and try to narrow themselves over word definitions that they don't actually have good information on in the first place. This is a very widely spread concept. There are even Native American cultures that talk about the energy centers of the body, the chakras. Um, you find this in many, many world systems. And the more, in my opinion, you know about that, the more different systems that you are exposed to, the more you're going to understand how universal it really is. This is true of so many of the things we do. And in the last 20 years, I've seen a lot of people trying to separate the peas from the carrots, so to speak. To just try to say, oh no, we must not work with more than one system. We must not let these things touch. But historically, they've always touched. They've always intermingled and they've always affected each other. Now, where did Plato and other ancient Greek philosophers learn about chakras? Well, almost certainly from India, or um, what they knew as India, which is more like what we would call Afghanistan. Um, so I'll certainly grant you that, but on the other hand, that's not certain either. Hello to Steve Taylor in the chat room. It's good to see you, Steve, because these were both Indo-European peoples, or whatever word is fashionable for that now. They had a shared ancestry. They didn't necessarily not have this as part of their shared ancestry. Um, but we certainly know that in Plato's day, they had communication between Greek and Indian philosophers. And so they probably were influencing each other. But that was over 2,000 years ago. That's long enough to be considered a settled part of Western practice. I am not a fan of the idea of purity. Um, I'm not a believer in the idea of pure philosophies where you can't be contaminated by anyone else's ideas. I think that's intellectual weakness. I'm not a fan of pure race. I think that is a horrible idea. I think that biologically we're far better off when we intermingle. I'm not a fan of pure culture because I think you only have to look at history to see that those cultures, which have many influences, are stronger and longer lasting than those that exclude exterior influences for the most part. Um, so I'm a great believer in letting the peas touch the carrots. And I will grant you that there are certain dishes that maybe should not be on the same plate, but it's not because either dish is necessarily bad. And I think the more we learn, the more we study, the better off we're going to be. Speaking of chakras, the more different ways that people have looked at them, that we familiarize ourselves with, the more understanding we will develop for ourselves. And of course, in deciding where our ideas settle, a lot of it comes down to our experiences and our personal practice. Um, I was taught a certain way to work with chakras. I was taught certain ideas about them, and I've learned many other ideas over time and integrated them where they fit, and ignored them where they didn't. in my personal practice, and that's what I recommend to you. It's what I recommend for everything. This is a very broad study, metaphysics in general, because metaphysics really is the study of life. It's the study of the spiritual aspects of life. Hello to Magical Cloud in the chat room. And Magical Cloud wishes all of us a great and healthy 2025. Thank you, Magical Cloud. I wish the same. I think it's going to be an interesting trip. But then, every year has been for many years now. I suppose every year always has been. And wouldn't we be bored if it wasn't? But going back to a point I made earlier in the program, and repeating something that I sometimes speak about, when I had my third degree initiation, and I was a very young person when I had my third degree initiation. I started training at the age of 12, and I was pushed through quite quickly, and I also mastered it quite quickly, in the opinion of my teachers. When I had my third degree, my primary teacher, Lady Crystal, said to me, "Remember, this is not the completion, but the beginning. You will always and must always learn new things. Um, yes, you've completed these steps, but the path is only just starting." And, that is what I would say to everyone. There is never a point at which you stop learning. You always have more to learn. There is always more room to grow. There are always new techniques you can benefit from. And just because you've mastered certain techniques doesn't mean that you cannot or should not learn others. Learn new ways of doing what you already know. And, for that matter, develop new ways. We're not just here to pass it on. We're here to keep it alive, to keep it growing. There has never been a time when this was a dead practice, and there, in my opinion, never should be. If we look back, for example, to the Hellenistic era, we will see a lot of things that are still in practice in metaphysics today. And we'll also see things that are not there, because much has changed since then. And we'll see things that are there that we really don't use now, because we developed other better ways of doing them. And all of that is good. And yes, I know there are some people who very intentionally practice Hellenistic magic only. And that's fine for them. And I'm not necessarily saying that as a person, you should not limit yourself to what you enjoy and appreciate. But as a community, this is a never-ending journey. And I feel that we must always keep expounding and expanding our knowledge and all of the different techniques and ways of doing things that are available, so that when we have had our day and gone to the ancestors and eventually to rebirth, we have left behind more than we found. I think that is, people often ask, what is the purpose of life? And I've made a number of answers to this over the years, but one of the big purposes of life that we see reflected in nature everywhere is constant growth and expansion. And one of the reasons that we are here is to leave more for our having been here. It's part of our purpose. And it's part of the purpose of everything. And if you look at virtually everything that exists, you'll see it to some extent doing that. So this is my message for today, and in some ways for every day. We are living, growing beings, and our practice must be a living and growing practice. We are not corpses in our tombs, maintaining exactly the same things that we did in some past life. We are living now, and we are growing, and we are not done. And speaking of a happy and healthy 2025, I've spent a lot of the last year talking about some of the challenges I see in 2025. But we are living and growing and magical people. We are building 2025. It is not just happening. It will be what we make it. And yes, other people are trying to make it other things. Um, but our actions are important to what we get. And that's true in everything we do. I always say, do that next right thing. Make that next right decision. Be the change you want to see, and keep going. I am here in the latter years of my life, after many years of adventures and misadventures, and more than a few, more than a few little wars around the way. And one of the reasons I'm still here talking to you is that I continue doing it. I get up every day and I do my work. I spread my message. I talk to people, and continue to grow, continue to change, and continue to interact with people. And that is why, nobody has won any bets yet on my going away, even though many people have bet on that over the years. Nor are they likely to do so in the future. And I give that same advice to you, to keep doing what you do, to keep working with what you work with, to keep communicating with people and spreading your message in the world. And whatever it is, don't stop. And if other people disagree with you, well, that's going to happen. That's part of life. And there'll be times you disagree with them. That too is part of life. We are not all meant to agree, nor will we ever. Now, we can also learn to work together even when we disagree. And that is highly desirable. But we'll always have different ways of doing things. And, some of the people I look back on as people I am so glad that I knew and worked with and consider to have been great friends, we didn't always agree on everything. And that's okay. But I'll tell you, the people who mattered in the history of this community and the world are the ones who kept doing what they did until the very end. There's an old saying that, an old cultural trope of people who retire and then sit around waiting to die. Horrible thing to do. You must always remain doing what you do. You must always remain active. You can change the ways you do it. And we have a saying that we have subscribed to for many years: love your message, not your platform. There are always new ways to approach what you do. But you always have to keep doing it. So that's my message to you today. And I hope you've enjoyed our little talk about chakras. And I think this will be my last broadcast from Restream. I expect to join you from a different platform tomorrow, and we'll see what difference that makes. And now, let us take a moment for a message from our sponsors. Why? Because we love our sponsors. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours. And thank you to our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub and Rev Don's Magical and Metaphysical Auctions. We will have information for you on our next auction soon. And Vivian in the chat room asks, what platform? And I believe the new platform is OneStream. But I don't have it in front of me, but it will make no difference to how you receive the program. It will be on all the same places it normally is. But our platform to broadcast it will be different and hopefully a little better. And I'll see you again tomorrow. And I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. Here in the Midwest, we are rather snowed under, and I believe more is coming. So I'm expecting a rather slow day, at least in terms of anything out in the world. But I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives and for this walk we walk together. We ask you to help us to remain true to ourselves and to remain open to growth and learning and exploration for all the days of our lives. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us from respect, we thank you for your presence. May you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always, and I'll see you again tomorrow.